Welcome to the Meaningful People Podcast.
How are you doing?
So this is the first time that Momo and myself are not in the studio recording together. So this is, it's better having you next to me, but this is a pretty cool alternative.
This is pretty cool. Yeah, if you're listening, you might not know what's happening, but if you're watching, you'll see we're on the... this is like a cool virtual studio type of technology. If you're listening, hopefully the sound quality is the same. But if you're watching, you understand what Nachi means. Sorry I couldn't be there in person, Nachi.
No problem. Momo, could you say a quick joke, maybe?
No, I cannot. How's that? No, that's your cue for the laughter.
Oh.
Was that we're gonna have to cut that out?
Yeah.
Oh, that is terrible.
Anyways, we're talking about our episode this week. This week we sat down with Rabbi Mordechai Burg, who now currently lives in Eretz Yisrael. He started out in the Five Towns, and I want to tell you something about Rabbi Burg that I find incredible about this episode. Listen, we put out episodes with Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson, with Avram Fried, Mordechai Shapiro, well-known superstars internationally, globally. And then we have some guests that, maybe if you didn't go to his yeshiva, if you didn't cross paths with him as a Rebbe, or you don't read his Svarim, then maybe you don't know him. I'm telling you right now, that this episode is an absolute gem, and I encourage you to stick with it, stay on, listen, because it's full of these nuggets of gems, it's full of sparks. So you just got to stick with it. What do you think, Momo?
Absolutely. Yeah, Rabbi Burg is such a pleasure to talk to listen to. He has a wealth of wisdom and experience and knowledge, well beyond the years that he looks like. To Nachi's point, you learn what that's about.
Right.
But he's just overflowing with such positivity and such authenticity, and has beautiful messages to share with us.
Yes, and we named this episode. You might think it's random, turning sparks into flames. It isn't random. It's not like some cliche. There's a reason for it. Obviously, Rabbi Burg has a sefer, he has an organization, Nitsotos, but there's a deeper meaning to that name and to the word sparks. You'll hear about it at the end of this episode from him. He says a story from a Rebbe of his that inspired that name. So stick with it. We want to talk about our friends at Touro University, and we want to highlight one of their Trailblazers. And this week's Trailblazer we want to highlight is from the class of 1994, and her name is Sarah Robbie. Now, Sarah is, she's a managing director. She's a partner at Marks Paneth, which is a top 10 accounting firm in the nation.
It really is, and she's gotten international recognition on the City Wealth Leaders List, and she helps advise high net worth individuals, wealth management, tax, estate planning, doing some really incredible things. And it all started at Touro, class of 1994.
Yeah. Yes, and I was born in 1995, so she was already achieving excellence while I was.
So she was trailblazing. She was trailblazing the way for Nachi to come into the world.
Yes, she was. Momo. Yes, she was. So go ahead. Head to 50.touro.edu. That's 50.touro.edu. Because we're all about highlighting trailblazers. We have a ton of trailblazers here on this podcast, and Touro's got a ton of trailblazers of their own. So go ahead and check them out. Enjoy this episode.
You are listening to the Meaningful People Podcast.
The podcast featuring our nation's most impactful, influential,
and meaningful people.
So you grew up in the Five Towns. You're making a lot of Five Towns references. Yeah. So you grew up in Far Rockaway.
And Lawrence.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood, growing up as Mordechai Burg.
No, I did not grow up as Mordechai Burg.
What did you grow up as?
It's like Voldemort, you don't want to say the name.
I grew up Burg? That's an interesting one.
I grew up as Matt Burg.
Matt
Burg.
That's a good stage name. Were you a musician?
Burg. It's like Alec Burg. It's a great stage name, Matt Burg. No, I was not a musician. Very far from a musician. It's an amazing thing, actually, growing up as Matt Burg. I grew up, my parents are both Balei Tshuva. So you're like when you come to the frum world and your parents are Balei Tshuva, so you don't really belong anywhere. like everyone plays Jewish geography. Oh, I grew up with this one. My father went to yeshiva here. My mother went to seminary there. We never had any of that. So it was actually an amazing journey.
Really?
Wow.
Were you an only child, or you were?
I'm the oldest of 4.
Okay.
So, we grew up here in Far Rockaway. Originally, I went to Hafter. I went to Hafter 1st through 5th grade.
That's a unique thing, by the way. Like, you don't find many Far Rockaway to Hafter.
Yeah. I was that. We were talking about the small bus. I was the small bus.
I think you were more like a bike.
We couldn't afford a bike back then. Far Rockaway wasn't what it is today. I got my bike stolen in Far Rockaway. That was old school Far Rockaway.
Rite of passage.
Absolutely. So
I'm still on the
Hafter-
Jewish geography thing, by the way.
What?
It's
But about
we
Tshuva
take it
not-
for granted the
not being
value of.
Yeah.
I used to always think like in those conversations where you're like, oh, who do you know, and this, and going back and thing, and like I would always think that the climax of that conversation is that, oh, very nice, like that is the spitz of that conversation,
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. That's as far as you can get. But
I'll
what I'm
see you
hearing from
never
you is
again.
that there's a lot of value in feeling comfortable and feeling that a person belongs. And without that, in the absence of that, it can be unsettling.
That word belonging, that's a word that needs to be unpacked, right? Because connection is different than belonging. So you said it in a deeper way. I think that's a really beautiful way of saying it. Because connection is like, yeah, I know a lot of people. Belonging is like, this is where you come from. So people would ask me like, oh, are you related to Burg from, and I would always cut them off. I would go like, no, I'm not related to anybody you know.
You really not?
No, not at all.
Do you know your cousins, or like?
I mean, I know my cousins. I grew up with them. I love them, but very, very, very different. I have Orthodox cousins. My mother's sister also became from. My grandmother became a Balas Tshuva at 70 years old.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's dope.
she passed away during COVID. Thank you. She was absolutely my inspiration. Wow. Like she was incredible. She started dressing modestly. She was, keeping Shabbos 100%. She kept kosher 100%. She was judgmental of all my other cousins. She really became super Orthodox.
What type
The
of life?
Nishmasa,
Yeah.
like where did that come from for her?
Old generation, they were so Jewish. Like they didn't need an Esha Torah seminar. They didn't need to go to Or Sameach. They knew, like, you're Jewish. This is the right thing to do. Her older sister, my great aunt, just turned 100, which is also like incredible. And by my grandmother's 90th birthday party, by her last birthday, my great aunt was just going off. She's like, I'm so proud of you. You did it right. Our parents are so proud of you in Shamayim. These people, they were so Jewish. It's actually something I think we're lacking because we're so in the frum world. So basic concepts like Jewish pride, we don't think about Jewish pride.
We don't have to, really.
Yeah, right.
Unless we're challenged.
But there's something amazing about having that as like a real baseline in
Foundation.
your life. Right. So when her children, she had 2 daughters, her children both became frum. It was sort of like a very natural progression. And she was this amazing, really just amazing person, the kindest, sweetest, nicest person, but so deeply Jewish.
What type of life was she living up until she was it like traditional?
Very traditional.
Like Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur?
Yeah, and there
Driving
was,
over to Temple Israel over here?
I think there
Oh,
was
yeah?
she was in Jersey, but I think there was like a Russian shul that she used to go to. And they had this really, again, warm, sweet rabbi. And, but I can't begin to explain what it's like. That was on my mother's side. On my father's side, really nobody's observant. But again, so deeply Jewish. And so let's say Pesach was by us. And growing up as a 7-year-old and sitting with all these people that are your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, and helping them wash and teaching them how to make a bracha, of Al Netilas Yadayim, and sitting with them at a Seder. It was...
Little Chabad house over there.
Yeah. Yeah. And my mother was very affiliated with Chabad when she was becoming frum. She actually went out to Minnesota to Rav Manas Friedman in the 70s.
Wow. That is so cool. So you grew up from...
It was a journey, for sure. Yeah, my parents were definitely observant before
Your
I was
parents
born.
both, they together became Balish, or they separately growing up?
Well, my parents knew each other as teenagers.
Okay.
So it was like I think it was a move that they certainly made together and apart. But they always knew each other. They knew each other for a long time, my parents. And then our home became steadily more observant as we got older. And it was again, partially because you send your kids somewhere, and now your kids are embedded in the community, and now you're living here, and so you do more, and things sort of creep in and seep in, and it's a journey, but it's an amazing journey. Like I meet a lot of guys in yeshiva that have similar story, and I tell them, like, you don't, like, because you're young, you don't realize what an incredible blessing it is to come from a family that's not necessarily observant.
So we asked to grow into that. We asked Beryl Solomon when we had him on here. I believe I asked him, if given the choice, would you be from birth or a Baal Tshuva? Or I asked you the question, honestly.
You did.
I asked it to you.
What'd you say?
You said, obviously, I think you
said,
our
I
Messiah
see
is
the beauty and the bracha that you're describing, and I'm grateful for the upbringing that I had, which is the opportunity to be from birth. And I think my work now is to see the beauty in it through the eyes of people that maybe had to make the choice themselves to not take for granted what I grew up with.
Right. I think I was born on top of the mountain also. I don't think it would be fair to say that, like, I was in a Baal Tshuva state, but it was definitely a part of our lives. My kids, I would say, are definitely born on top of the mountain. Now my kids, I have a 19-year-old and an 18-year-old daughter.
You have a 19-year-old?
Yeah, I'm an old man already. I have a 19-year-old daughter.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Want to talk about shidduchim? Let's get there.
We'll get there.
Let's really, like,
but you look like you're like 33 years old.
That's so kind of you.
You got married when you were 14.
Not his being kind.
No.
I'm not being. Well,
because he's trying to sell merch.
Meaningfulminute.org. Shipping and taxes do include. But you look very young.
Thank you.
You have a 19-year-old. How old were you when you got married?
21.
Okay.
21. So I have a 19-year-old daughter, and she's in a seminary called, she and my 18-year-old daughter are in a seminary called Ofakim, which is like 10 minutes from Gaza. Wow. It's like a hardcore, it's where Shimshon Pincus's seminary. So
is that like the closer you are to Gaza, the more from it is? Is that?
Well, you need a lot more bitachon, I'll say that. I asked them, I said, what happens when a war breaks out? They're like, well, you come home. It's like you don't have a snow day. You have like rocket days.
Wow.
But they say, they're like, Abba did very well for where he came from. It's like, it's very sweet. Being kind. Yeah.
That's probably so, it's also probably like an experience for them because they're brought up, obviously, we'll get to it, but you live in Eretz Yisrael now, and they grew up in Eretz Yisrael. You coming from a home with parents who are Baal Tshuvas, and you growing up as Matt Burg, to them being born and raised in Eretz Yisrael, in Ofakim, like, the needle just keeps moving. Like, your great-grandkids are going to be, like...
They're not going to be able to speak to me, my great-grandkids. They'll be, like, so Israeli. Yeah, they won't have anything to do with me. It'll be very sweet.
Is that, like, something calculated on your end, that you just wanted to keep pushing the needle and keep just becoming more and more religious? And
I don't know. It depends what you mean when you say religious. If what you mean is observant, I think observant is that's a hard thing to do. Right? What we ask from your average balabas today is impossibly hard. It's like work an exceptionally long day, daven with a minyan 3 times a day, learn, raise your children, pay yeshiva tuitions. Like observance, that's a really hard thing to
10%
do.
10% it's tzedakah at least.
Right, at least.
Yeah.
Right? And to say nothing of just the challenge of being a part of the community and raising your kids within the community. And then there's this other thing, which may be another understanding of religious, which is to feel deeply connected. And that's exceptionally hard. One of the advantages of living in Eretz Yisrael is there is something different in the air. Like vacation, it's like a normal thing for my kids. Before, let's say one of my daughters, before she went to SEM, she wanted to really daven to Hashem that she'd have Hatzlacha.
And just mosey on to the Kosel.
Yeah, that was it.
That's amazing.
That's a natural thing to do. I have a sister-in-law who has a son who's amazing, but the most ADHD kid you'll ever meet in your entire life. And he's this incredible, incredible kid. She lives at Kever Rachel davening for her son. And when he made us see him, he was like talking about, he's like, I owe so much to my mother. Because he said you would think she works in Kever Rachel, the amount of time she spends there. But to have Makomas HaKadoshim like that, to have a place to go to like pour out your heart to Hashem, it's
you wrote
in
an
the
article
air.
about that.
That's right. That's
you
right.
did.
Right after the CM, I wrote that article because I was so inspired by that kid.
He thanked his mother.
He thanked his mom.
For davening for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
We should all do that, right?
The power of Mama Rachel. Yiddish Mama.
I think as the older I get, the more I appreciate what my own parents did. And as kids, can we really appreciate what our parents did for us?
No.
But it's not just, let's say, the money, which is insane how much they've given us, but they loved us into being. Because there were people in the world that no matter what you did, they were there and they said, like, yeah, I got your back. Even when you got in trouble, but you knew in their heart of hearts, like, this, like, you're theirs. And that's such an exceptional gift that our parents give us. And I saw it in this kid's face. I was like, he really knows how much his mother loves him.
Wow. I want to take you back to the first half of that construct before getting back to the connectedness. I love this topic that we're in right now. But before we miss the opportunity, I want to take us back. You ran through very quickly the rigorously demanding lifestyle that we have, set out for ourselves in From Life. And I want to make sure that we do our part in highlighting how awesome that existence is. Demanding, yes, but when we're able to live such full lives, I don't want to leave it as just a difficult task, but I want to also highlight how incredible of an existence that is when meeting, the order of the day, when meeting those demands.
Of course. I'll share with you. I think as you were speaking, I was thinking, I'm like, what's coming up for me right now? Like, because of course you're right. You never want to say that it's that it's difficult to be a Jew and that it's painful to be a Jew. At the same time, I think that people really are doing their very best, and we've set the bar really, really high. I think it's important that we give a voice to the challenge. I think the difference, let's say, between the Rav Moshe Feinstein shmooze of old, if your kids are going to hear all the time how difficult it is to be a Jew, so then of course. And at the same time, I think the Jewish community is so amazing. And the baseline of what we're doing today, for example, I live in Ramat Beit Shemesh. On my block is MDY, Eli Stefanski, right? The global movement of Daf Yomi.
How are you?
I owe so much Akar Satov to Eli Stefanski. My real estate has shot up through the roof.
So true.
Because if you're one of those hardcore MDY guys and you want to
it's like the blocks surrounding Eish Kodesh.
Right, exactly.
It's like they're not pretty blocks, but
it doesn't
Eish
matter.
Kodesh.
That's right. And it's but you see these people that are just, it's so demanding, and we're stepping up to the challenge, and people are really struggling with it. And then on top of that, we're saying to them, which is what they want really, which is, it's really hard just to go through the motions and not feel it. And so, and I think this is, again, as we walk in the footsteps of Mashiach, as we're like in these final moments, people are demanding that sense not only of that carbon tamid daily life, but of a real connection to the Eibishter. And so I think that we're in a place today where we have to say two things. Number one, this is really hard and you're doing it, and that's awesome. And if you don't feel like you're there yet, understand that we understand how hard it is. And I think that's the voice I was trying to speak out, to make those people understand they're not alone. And then what you're speaking about, which is the olam hazeh of it. If you would have told me, let's say 24 years ago when I was in yeshiva, that the choices that I would make would lead to a better olam hazeh, that the nachas you get from your children, that just what you can do with your life when you're doing it meaningfully, that's a great selling point. And I think you're right. We have to tell people that it is awesome. And it's not just hard, but it's also, look, hard things are awesome. Mm-hmm. Anything we've done great in our life has been a challenge.
Anything worthwhile, yeah.
I hear that. You hear that?
Absolutely. I hear that loud.
It's beautiful. I'm curious about, was there a point when you were growing up? I mean, take us through the mat to Mordechai. And I'm curious, because we spoke about this in passing, but your parents grew up a certain way and they became, Baal Tshuvas. Did they want you to become more religious? Was that a point of contention for them? As you see many times where parents are like, I don't want to send my kid to Israel. They're going to not come back. They're going to get too from. So I'm curious in your own personal life, the mat to Mordechai, and was that the wishes of your parents?
The first thing I could tell you is my parents are exceptionally growth-oriented people. And that's also part of the blessing of growing up in that type of family. And my mother didn't get a yeshiva education when she was growing up. And the joke in my family is if there is a shiur, my mother's going to the shir. And she's like, my parents have made Aliyah. In fact, my entire family lives in Israel now.
Wow.
So
Because you went, or
actually, my parents went first, believe it or not.
that's
Like,
nice.
I didn't believe they were actually going to do it. I thought it was like, okay, they say they're going to do it,
Always
but
been paving the way for you.
we always live in the 5 towns. So, like, nobody leaves, like, Ramat Beit Shemesh is the 6th town, it's pretty close. But my parents are exceptionally growth-oriented. My father never had a yeshiva education, but he was always actively involved in our Jewish life. So he was our Little League coach, for Young Israel for Akwe, back in the 80s.
I don't think that was a winning team, was it?
It was a winning team.
Shari was the team, no?
See, you're bringing up very old beef. I want you to know, Ad Hayom Hazeh, I have a certain...
Against Shari?
It's not against Shari.
It's against Shari.
When I drive by Shari, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
I feel
You've given Shirim in Shari.
have I given a shir?
Rumor has it you don't kiss the parochas when you do.
Erroneous.
Not true.
I always
Not
take it a
true.
step too far. Is that true? That's what people
There
say.
was a Young Israel for Akwe team that they nicknamed themselves the Pathetics, but that was my little brother's team.
Oh, okay.
But my dad was always involved
That's
in
not
our
so
life.
kind, by the way.
But it was to themselves.
Yeah, okay.
It was a fun name. So my dad was always involved in our lives. And my father's thing is the Pesach Seder. So he's like all year long preparing Divrei Torah for the Pesach Seder. And just they've always been people that have like tried to do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So I would not say that the tension was against them at all. And another amazing thing about my parents is they're very pluralistic, like authentically. And they like my brothers and I are very different. My sister and I are very different, but there's a lot of love in the family and a deep respect, and everyone's taken their own path. And that's a really special thing also. And so like I have a brother that lives out in a place called Niriyah, which is like Kiryat Sefer, and then like lots of Arab villages, and then him. I have another brother who lives in Sur Hadassah. I have a sister who lives in Beit Shemesh.
Was it your whole family made Aliyah?
My whole family made Aliyah. My whole family.
That's not fair.
My wife's whole family, except for one sister, but Kimat, my wife's whole family,
It's
lives in
amazing.
Eretz Yisrael. Yeah.
The biggest challenge, I can't say the biggest challenge. In my small mind, the biggest challenge of making Aliyah is probably leaving family.
Sure.
It's a big step. You're leaving family. But to make Aliyah with your entire family, you can't ask for a better situation than that. That's amazing.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, you're 100% right. First of all, I see neighbors that they have, maybe they have a sibling or two, but they're really on their own. And there's something very difficult about it.
Mesiras Nefesh. But they're being Mesiras Nefesh for their children to be able to grow up there with family.
For sure. And it's a much simpler life. Like it's a really simple life. And that's a beautiful thing. Like I owe my wife a tremendous amount of Akar Satov. I was for sure the guy that would have gotten stuck here. It was when we were newly married and I was learning in Kailul. So I was here. And of course we had dreamed about going to Eretz Yisrael. It was something we spoke about when we were dating. But my wife was really the one who pushed it home. In fact, we had a couple of Bachrim over for Shabbos, and they said, Rebbe, when did you know that you wanted to make Aliyah? And my wife goes, have you figured it out yet that you want to make Aliyah? Like, did you get there yet?
It's always the wives.
Yeah. She's a person who's deeply connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my wife, and she's a person who really wanted to have an Eretz Yisraelic life. She's from Queens. So,
Ready for a tangent?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Open parentheses.
Yeah.
Scare quotes.
Might not close for a while, so stay tuned. I find that, and we've made meaningful minute events. Brooklyn, 5 towns, Baruch Hashem, like each one had 800 to 1,000 people.
Wow.
And it's usually like, the balance is usually like 800 girls, 200 guys, 900 girls, 200 guys, or 150 guys, I find that girls, and that could be even the high school age, seminary age, even getting married, are just more spiritual and maybe more open to that growth as opposed to guys. And someone who, like you, who teaches in yeshiva and also in seminaries, I'm curious from your perspective, is that MS? Is it true? And B, why?
I definitely think that there are two very different experiences. Teaching in a seminary and teaching in a yeshiva, they're very different. And the boys wanted me to shout them out. Shout out to the Tanya boys. I teach Tanya Shir in the afternoon.
You do?
Wow.
Sure, of course.
Wow, look at you.
Of course. The Rashiva Mevaseret is like a very special person. And he's like, there's going to be a chevra of guys that need chassidus. So like I have that chevra every year. And instead of Gemara B'kiyas, they figure out how to learn Gemara other times of their day.
It's amazing.
Instead of Gemara B'kiyas, we learn Tanya.
Do you do it straight up Tanya? Do you a
Yeah.
parish? Do you have a
No, straight unadulterated Tanya.
Wow.
That's like 100% vodka.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's it's really very special. And those guys are amazing. And then there's another shiur called Journeys right after that. I think the common denominator in both of those shiurim is the guys want to know the adult version of Judaism. As so many of us got off the train, of let's say learning Chumash in 3rd or 4th grade. You start learning Mishnayos, you start learning Gemara, and when do you ever have the opportunity to really learn Hashkafa? When do you have the opportunity to really think about Yiddishkeit in a deeper way? And so I'll share with you my experience with the guys is they are so thirsty to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if you give it to them, you'll see their face lights up. When they get something, when they're like, oh, and especially if you give a shiur with like a lot of connections, they're like, I never thought about that before. I never realized like this was connected to that and everything goes back to Gan Eden, and they go, like they really get a geschmack from it. You mentioned everybody wants to live around Eish Kodesh.
Yeah.
I mean, that was Rav Weinberger 101. He was really bringing back talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu in a way of just being a part of your life, really leading a connected life to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The boys want that absolutely, l'chalutin. I don't think they get enough of that, actually. I think the girls actually get a lot of that because maybe there is a more natural tendency towards speaking about, let's say, the inner things when it comes to these women. They're more, let's put it this way, the girls, from the day they arrive in seminary, it's all about relationships. It's all about, and not just relationships like what their, future shidduchim are going to be, but the whole everything. It's talking things through. It's coming from a deeper emotional place. And so the goal, it seems to me, is the same. Is we're trying to introduce the Rebbeinu Shalom across the spectrum. But it's a very different experience of that for the girls and for the guys. I do experience, at least the places that I teach in Tomer Devora and in Sharfman's, and then I speak in a lot of the different seminaries. You will see a certain natural gisha, a certain movement towards the Rebbeinu Shalom and the girls. That is less obvious.
They have to pack it in a smaller amount of time. The guys have like 4 years to like...
It depends where, for sure. There are some yeshivas where they get 4 years, and there are some yeshivas where they get a year or two. But let's say even in the 4-year yeshivas, it's sometimes, and this is a beautiful thing. I don't want to chas v'shalom say anything negative. It's a beautiful thing that the boys are learning so much. I have a nephew that went to Brisk, and the guy is just a legitimate Talmid Chacham, and he's incredible, and at a very young age, and one wonders. It happens to be that boy is a real Yarei Shemayim, but sometimes it's possible to worship Gemara and not to worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it becomes easy, especially if you're smart. It becomes easy to lose yourself to the lamdus, and especially because in the competitive environment of a yeshiva, sometimes it's possible to really be serving yourself. And it may look on the outside like you're excelling, but on the inside you feel very empty.
Right.
And I know for me, when I was in Kailul, I burnt out. In the very beginning of Kailul, I really burnt out. And my Rebbe, who's a real Litvak, my Rebbe Rav Parnas Shlita, he was the one that said to me, Mordechai, you need to start learning Chassidus. Really? And he said, I think you should start going to Rav Weinberger's shiurim. And whenever Rav Ephraim Waxman came to town, he always said, you have to go to Rav Waxman's shiurim. And it was oxygen for me. I really needed to go back to that place.
The other night I was by Eish Kodesh for the yard sale of the PSS. Now they had a halula, and there was a ton of people there, hundreds, 500, I don't know exactly. We did a podcast a few weeks ago with Dr. Henry Abramson, so it was especially more meaningful for me there because Dr. Abramson really specialized on the Eish Kodesh and the PSSna, and so I just started learning about that, and they showed a video, like a tribute of the life of the PSSna, and just like the whole story, and I was blown away. But if you look around the room, there was a lot of young guys. Talking guys who are not married, young base medrash guys, maybe 12th grade. And I think maybe for me growing up, that when I was in 12th grade, like that didn't exist so much. It was more like we were just looking to have a good time or find the local place to get some buzz. But
Backup Dave's?
Yeah. Wow. But nowadays it's like a totally different thing that maybe boys are yearning for. And I'm sure both exist still. But they were there to just dance and connect and dance around over Weinberger and sing, and it's amazing.
The community has come an exceptionally long way.
When you say community, do you mean Klal Yisrael or 5 towns?
For sure, Klal Yisrael. For sure, Klal Yisrael. You definitely see it in the 5 towns. I remember when Eish Kodesh opened and when it was in a basement still. I remember downloading Rav Weinberger's shiurim online, before they were on YU Torah for free.
Pirated?
No, we paid for it. It was like $1 a shiur or something.
Yeah.
The impact, there's no doubt that the impact of that style has, like water on a rock. It's made a big impact for sure in the community. And I think we've done an amazing job of restoring that. And you're right. I'm not surprised to hear that so many kids today are into that. You see it, let's say in the summers in NCSY Kollel. I'm there every night. It's amazing.
You're the mashpia there.
I'm in NCSY Kollel. Really, I'm just a Rebbe. I think my official title for NCSY summer is mashpia. But for sure in NCSY Kollel, the desire of 15, 16-year-old kids to hear a shiur, to learn about why the world was created and what we're doing, and you see Thursday night, the dancing, it's really special. And these kids want it, and they really want it. It's very special.
You find that maybe if we, I don't know if I should ask this, but like for me personally, I find that from first grade and then high school and base medrash, I think I had a yearning the older I got to just like start again from Aleph and teach to me as an adult what Aleph was. Teach to me Bereshis with like really in a way that I can understand it, because as a first grader you can understand Bereshis in a very elementary way, but you learn Bereshis as an adult. You learn about Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and Leah and Dinah and Rachel and Rivka, and it's just like, wow, it's like through a different lens. Do you think institutionally we should just like automatic peel back? Let's go. Everyone back to the beginning. Like just same way we like go crazy about Daf Yomi. Everyone, let's get back to the beginning. Maybe you're saying we do with Shnai Mikras.
Shnai Mikra is amazing, but I think you're saying something more than just Shnai Mikra.
Let's go with the saying more part. That sounds good.
Is that true?
I think so.
It's like a very rabbinic move, right? Like
yeah.
What
you're saying.
What you said was excellent. Let me just say it in my own words, and then you say something completely different.
You saved me right here. I need a lifeboat.
Yeah, for sure. I think
I'm sinking here.
You're doing great. So far, all the English words you've said have made sense.
Yeah?
All the math has made sense. I listen to your episodes.
Okay. I get myself into trouble sometimes.
Momo's a lawyer, so I like listening to Momo or watching Momo correct you. That's one of my favorite parts.
By the way, that's why
I try not to do that.
One of the
you
reasons
do it in
I
a
have
beautiful
Momo,
way.
Okay.
He's counsel. He's like, so I don't put my foot in my mouth. We have a meter running. Like this is costly.
Yeah, I hear that.
I don't think we're able to do this during work
I can't
hours.
preclude you from putting it in. I can help you get it out.
You said Momo like looks at me like, yeah, no, yeah, But you hear what I'm saying?
I do hear what you're saying. I think you're 100% right, and I think that as adults we have such a deeper appreciation for the beauty of Chumash.
The simplicity, yeah.
Yeah, and it's when you go back and you learn these things as an adult, and you learn, let's say we just finished Parshas Noach, right? And you really learn what Migdal Bavel was about. Like as a kid, you grow up and you're like, okay, they wanted to rebel against Hashem, they built a tower.
Yeah.
Right? And then you start like, what does that mean? And then you start learning, like the deeper wisdom of what these things were really about, and it's exceptionally inspiring.
And then you realize like those things are happening today.
Absolutely.
But you can't realize that as a kid. It's impossible.
You're not going to tell a third grader, right? Let's take Migdal Bavel. You're not going to tell a third grader that was a story about technology, right? Using bricks, that was the first time anybody ever did that. That's why the Torah highlights that they made a building of bricks, because it created security in a dangerous world coming off of the Mabul. And so for us as adults, talking about what does a community do when they're confronted by fear? And how do they use technology to subdue individuality and to create conformity? And what's God's response to that, right? And teaching us the beauty of difference, the dignity of difference, and giving us our own unique language that we can all speak in. These are the things that if you would tell them to a third grader, they would have no idea what you're talking about. But you tell them to someone who's 16 years old, 18 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old. These are deeply relevant, timeless messages, and especially for us. So yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to invite you to elaborate on the dignity of difference. I thought that was a very cool terminology. But let's highlight what we mean about that.
This is maybe one of the differences, between growing up with parents who are Balei Tshuva and growing up with, let's say, from birth families. If everybody's sort of one way, so then you can probably, hopefully, see the beauty in the way that you grew up. When you grow up with people who are not like you, let's say, because I went to Hafter through 5th grade, then I went to Darche, right? And so that's an interesting transition, right? Those are two wonderful, beautiful yeshivas who have very different ways of seeing the world. Of course, there's a lot in common, but two very different approaches. And so let's say growing up in both, I really appreciated looking back on what each one offered. And the older I get, the more I appreciate the complexity of each of these systems and what they're trying to do. And some may take a more open approach, a more embracive approach, and some may take a more negotiating approach. And even within negotiation, there's a spectrum of how much you negotiate and where you negotiate. And I've come to the realization, and my parents taught me this growing up, and as a kid I was like, I remember rolling my eyes at it, but now that I've gotten a bit older, Nachi says I don't look old, which is very kind.
Not a day older than 33, but yeah, go on.
I really appreciate that. I can really appreciate the beauty of where all of these people are coming from, and Yiddishkeit is a 70-lane highway, and I've grown up in a very misnagdisha yeshiva. That's where my family davened when I was younger, and we would go to Crown Heights for Shabbos, and that was like a real thing. I saw the Rebbe, and it was like,
did you?
Yeah, and I had these amazing dualities, and they were definitely this. They did not feel harmonious to me when I was a kid. Mm. And looking back on it, let's say the rigor of growing up in, let's say, a more brisk environment, right, and really learning like hardcore lumdus, and at the same time being exposed to the warmth and the depth of Hasidus, it's been this incredible journey. I would love to share that with my own Talmidim, like find the beauty in every community. And you can, because even just, let's say if we took a step back from Hashkafa for a second, the chesed that is happening in the Jewish world is off the charts. And I know you had my roommate, Dr. Jonathan Donath.
Yes.
Actually, my roommate from many years ago.
Texted me this morning that you walked down the aisle by his wedding by yourself with an up hat and a cane.
I wasn't by myself.
Were you not by yourself?
I had another guy who was walking with a up hat and a cane with me.
You?
I think so.
I don't think so.
I'm pretty sure Asher Klein walked down the aisle with me.
Okay. A second, why?
There's no explanation that's going to be reasonable here.
I have a question. Why?
Yeah.
You're also friends with Yitzi Haber.
That's true.
The Schnitzel guy.
In
You know the
fact,
Schnitzel guy?
Sure.
Yeah, in fact, there's a little known fact that
I'm still going to get back to the why, by the way.
Yeah.
I actually was one of the Schnitzel guys.
For real?
Yeah, because Yitzi and I were very, very close. We still are. And,
Well, I'm trying to get him on this podcast, so
I've actually said to him a number of times that he has to come on this podcast.
Yeah.
He and Donnie are amazing.
he's evading.
Yeah, that he happens to be a very tznius person. He's really not into himself at all. Like he really just wants to make people happy.
Well, Yitzi, if you don't come on, we're going to continue talking about you. So
Yitzi's one of my closest friends in the world. So I actually probably got the top hat from Yitzi when I walked down the aisle. That makes sense. But originally when we were in yeshiva and Yitzi started doing these jobs, dancing, so it was like, hey, you want to make a couple $100 on a Motzei Shabbos dancing at some kid's bar mitzvah. So I would do it, me, Donnie, and Yitzi.
he was by my bar mitzvah, and he also, I was recently by my nephew's bar mitzvah, and he was there.
Yeah.
You guys just don't age. It's crazy.
There was I won't say who because I don't know if he would want me to say it publicly, but there was a Rav that actually sat me down and spoke to me about it and said to me, like, you have to decide like who you want to be, because I was really learning seriously in Koil, and I was loving it. And, I was, Baruch Hashem, I had a great Rebbe, and I was very close with him. And at the same time, you're doing that. And it's complex when you're young and you're building a career. Like,
It brings you back to sort of the duality that you spoke about.
Yeah. Yeah. Rebbeim are normal people.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be able to talk about, when
Rebbeim.
we were younger, we did crazy things. We did things that we didn't think about the impact. This is a true story. I mean, there are pictures out there. I'm not particularly proud of this, but I did wear a wedding dress to Yitzi Haber's wedding in the dancing.
Oh, wow.
I was out there in a wedding dress.
We're going to have to get a picture.
Two of my closest friends were walking me down the aisle with candles, at Yitzi's wedding. You can imagine it was a very shticky wedding.
Yeah.
So everyone was trying to do something a little bit different.
I feel like I threw you onto another tangent. You were saying about Jonathan, your roommate.
So, he was talking about when he was on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I've had a number of people that I know that have been on the podcast. Dr. Kivi Perlman, another Five Towns guy.
You grew up with him.
Sure.
You grew up with
absolutely.
Menachem Sansky?
I don't think so.
He just passed by on the street. That's why he came into my mind. Shout out Menachem.
No, Kivi Perlman was lifeguard in Simcha Day Camp, So
I'm sure you grew up with Sani.
Sure. So, Donath was speaking about how amazing Klal Yisrael is and how many chesed organizations there are.
Yeah.
And I actually have a Talmud who's getting his master's in, I think he just finished his master's in social work. And he told me that he specifically doesn't want to work with the Jewish community. He wants to work with the Gentile community. And when I asked him why, he said, they don't have the infrastructure that we have. Like, if you have a problem, name a problem. We've already created an organization, to help you with that problem. And so we are this exceptional community. And sometimes I think we get caught up in the differences that we have and, they do it like this and we do it like that. And we've become very polarized. I don't know if a kid like myself today would have been as accepted, into a completely different world coming from where I was coming from. We were much more open back in the 80s. And there was something exceptionally beautiful about that. I understand the dangers. I'm just saying, when we see the beauty of all of Klal Yisrael, I think we're better for it.
Mm-hmm. We are joined by Shmuel Sackett all the way from Eretz Yisrael, and our listeners right now are getting excited because they know when Shmuel's in the studio, it's because the Dream Raffle is back.
It is back. L'Shem
Welcome back.
Haba Yerushalayim is back.
Yes.
That's right. And the dreamraffle.com.
Yes.
That is what you have to click on, if you will. And for those watching, it's right here on the bottom of the screen. And you purchase a raffle ticket, and you can win $1 million apartment in the heart of Yerushalayim.
Living the dream.
Living the dream. Absolutely incredible. And I just met somebody who, this is our 5th year, and someone said, Shmuel, I've been doing this for 4 years, I haven't won. I said, no, you've won each year.
Wow.
Because the money goes to incredible things. For example, right now, Shemitah just ended, right?
Yeah.
We're after Rosh Hashanah, Shemitah just ended. We are the biggest donor to farmers, to Israeli farmers. We've planted over 500,000 fruit trees in Israel over the years.
Wow.
And now, from the end of Shemitah for the next 2 months, we're planting 70,000 new fruit trees.
Wow.
So, and that comes from funds from the Dream Raffle and some other amazing things. So $1 million apartment, and you can win. We're offering double tickets. So you order now. You order 1, we'll give you 2. Order 5, give you 10, and so on. And use code MPP for Meaningful People Podcast. There it is, MPP. And save an additional $10. It would be a great pleasure for me to present the winning ticket to someone who said, Shmuel, I saw this on MPP, and I used the code, and I got 2 for 1, and that's why I won. That would give me great simcha.
All right, folks, enjoy the rest of this episode, but make sure to head to dreamraffle.com. You had mentioned, and I'm going to close this parenthesis soon. Well, it's a long, I told you it's not going to end for a while, but you had mentioned the C word, conformity. And conformity is a hot topic. We actually had a few articles on meaningfulmoney.org about conformity.
I think I was one of those articles.
You were one of those articles.
Yeah.
And you weighed in on that conversation. The conversation was just about, is conformity something that is admirable, or is conformity something that, like, there's no place for that in Yiddishkeit? And I'm curious, here on this podcast, what you think about conformity, especially when it comes to chinuch with our children.
I would hope, I don't know if this is always true, but I would hope that we're raising our kids to be radically individualized. Because if we really believe in the notion of a neshama, if we really believe in the notion of a soul, then a soul by its very definition is unique. Hashem doesn't create copies. A great Rebbe will not only allow, but will foster that Talmud to access his individuality. And sometimes the challenge of raising our kids in the chinuch system, because this really is new historically. Mm-hmm. It used to be your father taught you, and then you taught your own children. And so it was easy to individualize education when you're dealing with one kid, and you're dealing with that kid where he is and what he needs. And then when we put our children in classrooms with 25, 30 kids, and now we're demanding a certain level of obedience. And so sometimes we can crush these kids.
Well, how do you balance the two?
Yeah. Well, I'll share with you. Let's say when I came to Darche, I had this amazing Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Krause. I don't know if he was there when you were in Darche.
He wasn't my Rebbe, but you know Rabbi Krause. You grew up in L.A. You don't know Rabbi Krause.
Sorry. Actually, I happen to have had amazing Rebbeim. The 3.5 years that I was in Darche, I really had amazing Rebbeim.
How do you get to Darche, by the way, from Hafter?
Rivlin busing.
Yeah, Riv Lab.
Rivlin.
It was.
1 second. Rivlin.
Let him enjoy this. Go for it.
He rarely messes up.
Go.
Rivlin. Yeah, you can go ahead.
It's not easy. I think when we were growing up in Farakwe,
Yeah.
so Baruch Hashem, my father was very matzliach, and he worked very hard to provide for his family. And in the end, we were very blessed by Hashem. In the beginning, when my father was first starting off his career, I wouldn't say we were poor, but we definitely weren't the wealthy family. Like you said, we were the Farakwe family sending to
I said that. I know. I said that. Whoa.
It wasn't easy, I think, socially. Like I knew that I was different. I knew that,
You're saying when you got to Darche?
No, when I went to Hafter.
When you went to Hafter. Okay.
Yeah. And it's not a knock on Hafter at all. Hafter's an amazing place.
You're saying it's more affluent?
It was at the
more
time.
affluent. Yeah,
It was at the time. And again, not a knock on them at all. I think they have amazing Rebbeim, amazing teachers. I never truly felt at home.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a little kid, again, I didn't know this back then, but I know it now. A lot of the acting out that I was doing in class is because I felt different.
Right.
And so at some point it just wasn't working. It wasn't a win. And so, I left. And actually it was an amazing story because, when you leave a school, so schools are not necessarily jumping to grab you and say, yeah, come to us. And Rabbi Bender and Rabbi Hertzberg, Olav Shalom, were the two people in the neighborhood.
Hertzberg.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was a very special man.
Yeah.
And actually I had interviewed with him years later to maybe work in South Shore. And I reminded him that he was one of the people that was willing to take me in, as a fifth grader. And just that sweet Varmkeit that he had.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Bender also was willing to take me in. And Mr. Altaby, who I became exceptionally close with, he had just joined the school as a principal. And so my parents felt comfortable because there was going to be a more legitimate secular education, and they, that's what they really wanted. And I made the move. And now I was with kids who were more in my bracket, let's say financially. I felt for the first time that I belonged. And so I was this kid who had become accustomed to acting out. And Rabbi Krause, to his credit, he used to make this thing called emergency fire drills. And if he saw me starting to get antsy, he would say, Burg, emergency fire drill. And that meant that I could leave the class for 15, 20 minutes, go run around, the fields of Darche, walk around, do my thing, and then come back. I've always had this exceptional gratitude, this exceptional akar satov, that he allowed me to be that kid. And he understood and appreciated that. And that was like such a tremendous gift.
Rav Gav mentioned this as well.
Another old friend of mine.
When it comes, he was in DRS and he had his Rebbeim who there's a rule there about, I think he said, being tucked in. Mm-hmm. And I think Rabbi Kamenetsky just turned his eye when it came to Rav Gav about that rule, or just let him be, and knew not to push that button. But again, like it's such a tough thing to balance, and you're trying to teach a class of 30. How are you supposed to not encourage conformity just for the sake of being able to teach them?
Yeah.
So I think I'm hearing a thread in what you're saying, and I think it goes a little bit to your question before, not only on this topic, but also on, relearning Bereshis, and you were asking if institutionally we would consider, starting again. And what I'm hearing in this thread a little bit is the balance, right? There's the conformity that we're talking about, and then there's the individuality, right? And I think on the nigle side of things, on the exterior surface, there is this aspect within Yiddishkeit that we all conform to. There's halacha, and there's Torah's hanigla that is very uniform, and we learn it from a very young age. But then when we mature, there's that need to go deeper, and that's when our individuality really blossoms. And it's very difficult to institutionalize that because by definition it is individual to every tchunas hanefesh, every neshama has to be able to access its own pneumius. And that can't be institutionalized.
So interesting.
In the way that nigla can.
My wife said the same thing about we can't like, you have to conform as like children, sort of.
It's not a bad thing to teach kids to be a part of a community. And actually that was the back and forth that happened in the Meaningful Minute articles. Yeah. Is the first article, which wasn't the article that I wrote, was this exceptionally beautiful article written by Rabbi Schonbrunn. And it was this really beautiful article about individuality. And of course, our community has standards. And being a part of the community, I think in that case, we were discussing if a community, let's say, has certain rules, that in order to go to that school, you have to sign on the book, like dotted line, these are the rules you're following. And so, as being part of the parents of that school, you have to acknowledge, like, I'm in this community and I have to conform to these rules. What's hard, I think, especially when you're talking about little kids, and I love the way you said it, the Taras Nigla, Taras Nistar line, is I'm not sure that as young kids, maybe even as teenagers, we can appreciate that within conformity, there's a tremendous amount of individuality, right? So let's say, Nachi, you're a big sports guy, right? So when we see basketball players reinventing the way that the game is played, they're still dribbling the same basketball. They have to conform to the same rules, right? You're not allowed, I mean, maybe today's NBA, you are allowed to travel, but let's say you're not, let's say there are rules that you have to conform to. But the way that the greats play the game is they're playing the game in a way that nobody else plays the game. And if we would really acknowledge the individuality of our soul, then we could say the same words of davening, but it would be a totally unique davening. And we could put on tefillin, but it would be a totally unique putting on tefillin. So many guys say, like, we're doing the same thing every day, and I'm doing the same thing as everybody else. And it does have that sense of I'm just doing this by rote. And I think that perhaps what we could do to balance it is we could say, look, these are the codes of conduct, right? This is what we need in order to successfully teach the class. And having that sense of like, okay, that kid is a little bit different, right? And maybe we're looking the other way on that one. Maybe we're looking the other way when it comes to tucking in his shirt. And I actually have the privilege of working with Rabbi Kamenetsky in the summer. I have to tell you, that is a special Jew. Like, he is just a phenomenal educator, really complex, really sophisticated. And I watch him, and I'm like really paying attention. I'm like, I want to be like you when I grow up, after I'm like 34. And on a classroom management level, maybe we need conformity.
Right.
But let's say when it comes to learning Gemara, everybody thinks a little bit differently. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky used to say that he asked Holzen akashas, not Eisen akashas. And he would ask, like more basic kashas. But from that came his style of shiurim. And of course, other people did it very differently. And what would happen if we really encouraged, I think in Slobodka, they actually really minimized the amount of time that you went to shiur because they wanted you to develop as an individual. And they pushed that. And perhaps maybe that's why in Slobodka, they had so many different types of Gedolim that came out of Slobodka, and Rav Ruderman, Rav Hutner, Rav Yaakov. They're all so very, very different. That's something I think we're doing a great job. I think we got to keep our eye on the prize. I think we're definitely doing better than we were 30 years ago.
I heard this Nakuda that you're illustrating as an answer to the age-old question of why the Torah repeats all of the karbonos of the Nesiim in Parshas Naseh. It goes through like one of the longest Aliyahs in the Torah, and Naseh is the longest parsha in the Torah because of how verbose the Torah is with each karbon. And when you look at it, by and large, it looks like everyone brought the same thing. Right. The Torah could have said all 12 of these Nesiim brought the following thing, karbonai, right? They could have done it in one. And I heard exactly like you're saying, on the surface, it was all karas kesev achash, mishkala, and it was all the same on the surface. But each Nasi brought their own individual avodah to that same thing that appeared the same on the surface. Right. And it was a completely different avodah. It was a completely different offering that each of these Nesiim were bringing. And of course, the Torah has to illustrate that, each one individually.
Yeah. Look, it's not easy, right? There's no doubt. I think as guys get older in base medrash and girls go to seminary, it becomes a little bit easier. The maturity allows, let's say, for a certain flexibility. And certainly it's hard when they're young. Yeah. But let's say, for example, I see Rebbeim today in high school, and I think they're doing such an incredible job. And especially there's so much, Baruch Hashem, there's so much talent out there. But they're doing a good job today, I think, building relationships with these kids when they're very young. And already in 9th and 10th grade, a lot of the guys will say, yeah, I really like my Rebbe, and I've spoken to my Rebbe, and I've built a relationship with him, and maybe I've gone to his house. And so when the Rebbe starts to get to know the kid as an individual, then we give these kids the gift of understanding. Especially for a 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, they don't necessarily have understanding. They're not holding to understand that they make sense. And so when we get to know these kids, we can tell them like, well, that makes sense, given what you're going through and what you're struggling with and what you're, where you excel. It makes sense that this is what your life looks like. And that's a really grounded, again, that word belonging, that's a really grounded thing for a kid. And that's a beautiful thing. And then as the Rebbe knows that, it gives the Rebbe the opportunity to be that much more sophisticated. And so when a parent shows up and says, well, my kid's not doing so well on the Gemara tests, the Rebbe might say, he's actually doing really well. He may not be doing well yet in this particular area, but he's actually coming along and we're discussing real things. And that, again, I think is a beautiful thing. And it encourages, I think, that sense of individuality. The more that we know the Talmidim on an individualized level, the more we give them that space to be themselves.
Yeah. I want to delve into a topic a little bit, shifting gears. You mentioned the term in passing, like water on rock, obviously from Rebbe Kiva's journey. And I think you're someone who has introduced a lot of change. You've observed a lot of change in your loved ones, and you deal on a daily basis with Talmidim that are implementing change in their life. And I want to invite you to talk a little bit about the mechanism of change and how maybe people are exposed to something that is very attractive to them. They want to grow, they're inspired, and they want that for themselves, but it's difficult to get there with the snap of a finger. Right. Can you talk a little bit about the mechanism of change?
Ultimately, change comes down to choice, right? And choice is not a simple thing. Because really what we learn as we get older is the only thing we're in control of is ourselves, and the only thing that I can introduce to anyone is information, right? So especially as Rebbeim, we have to be so careful not to control our Talmidim. And we may want them to make different choices, but that's not really within our control. And giving them the space to figure it out for themselves is a really big avoda, because sometimes you just want to go like, you want this, just do it already. Just do it, man, right? But if it was that simple, then they would have already done it. And people don't change until they're ready. And that's a very slow, very long process that requires massive amounts of patience. I think the gift that we can give our Talmidim, our Talmidot, our families, our communities, is we can be exceptionally patient with people. And we could wait, because we know that, let's say, we're fundamentally different people than the people we were 20 years ago. And we're probably going to be fundamentally different 20 years from now. And so sometimes we box people in and we're like, okay, this is who you are. We have no idea what's going on inside of them. I actually, for myself, I was actually rejected from Mevaseret, which is now the place where I teach. When I was a Bacher, I didn't get into Mevaseret. And we had to fight my way in. I had to have a second Bechina, and it was not a pleasant process. And the reason that they didn't accept me the first time around is because I really didn't do that much in high school. And I wasn't the guy that they were looking at saying like, yeah, he's going to come to yeshiva and really steig. I wasn't that guy. And on the second interview, what I said to them was, I know when you look at my body of work, I don't deserve to get in. And I'd gotten into other yeshivas, and yeshivas perhaps that cared more about my academic standing than my heart. I really wanted to go to Mevaseret because that was the place where I knew they were going to, work on the Rahman Aliba boy. They were going to work on like the connection, through the heart. And that's what I really wanted, because that's what I felt I was missing. And I told them, like, you don't know, I've been waiting to go to Israel. I've been waiting to become that guy. And that's what convinced them to let me in. The first time around, I sort of got boxed in, like, okay, this is what you did in high school, so this is what you'll do in Israel, and this is the adult you'll become. And we know that's not true. And we know that people can sometimes, my grandmother turned around her life at 70 years old, right? So we know that people can change. So what we can do is we can introduce information. But what we have to be really careful of is, okay, so we've put the information out there, and it takes time, right? That al levavcha that the Gra talks about, that we can put the information out there and it sits on your heart, and then slowly but surely it drips in. And the lessons that you give a Talmud may not click, maybe not for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, but eventually we hope that they'll fall in. So the first thing I think we have to talk about is, do we create safety for our Talmidim to put something out there that's real, that's meaningful, that we know is life-changing, but that they may not be ready to hear? And do we have the patience to say, when they're ready to change, they will? And for them, because we know ourselves, right? You don't change until it stops working, right? Rock bottom is a beautiful place to build a foundation. And everyone chooses where they have their rock bottom. And sometimes people go, I'm just tired of davening without any meaning. I'm just tired of it. I'm done. And maybe that means that for a minute they stop davening, or maybe it means that they pick up a sefer and they say, okay, I'm going to really delve into this. And everyone has their own journey. Everyone has their own path. And as long as we can hang in there as they're on that path, I think we see good things in the end. I think so.
If someone were to be speaking about you, Rabbi Mordechai Burg, and they say, you know what, Rabbi Burg is passionate about ... What would you say that is?
That's such a good question.
Happens to be, I think, one of your Talmidos gave it to me. Eliana something.
Mm-hmm.
What's her last name?
Samimi?
Yeah. You know I wasn't going to get that last name.
Yeah.
Set up to fail.
I think if you asked me, and this might be a reflection of my own journey that I took, I think embracing the vulnerability of life is huge. And I think I don't think it's just for kids. I think it's for adults also. For sure, when we see it in teenagers, they're blowing in the wind. It's hard. It's really hard out there today. And there's so much coming at them so fast. And are they enough, right? That question of, am I enough? You see it come out a lot, let's say, in the dating process, right? We all have these inner negative beliefs about ourselves. And there's a vulnerability to putting yourself out there when it comes to dating. And think about how hard that is. We're married now, but think about, go back, right? Be 21, 22, 23 years old again. Well, how much time do you spend together?
No, all three. It's not a throuple. I'm gonna have to cut that out. But yeah, go on.
Let's say when you're 23 years old, I see the love. By the way, I do see the love between you guys. It's very special. When you're 23 years old, imagine being out there on a date and really sharing, hey, this is what I struggle with. Because you don't want to marry somebody that can't hold that with you. You want to marry somebody who could see your humanity and could say, I'm with you through that. And that's a really courageous thing to do.
Yeah.
And all of chinuch is that, right? You open up a Gemara. You can't punctuate it. You can't translate it. You can't vowelize it. You're missing the background information. You don't know how to plug in the Rishonim. You've never learned how to analyze a dialectic, right? Gemara is an exceptionally vulnerable thing to do. Right? All things are really vulnerable. Let's say coming to Eretz Yisrael, leaving your family 6,000 miles away. There's tremendous vulnerability in that. Meeting new people, right? There's so much vulnerability over and over again. And just when you get good at something, we up the ante and we say, okay, now do this, right?
Yeah.
And the task of life, I think, is so daunting. What I really would want, if I could give a gift to anyone, maybe most to myself, would be, it's okay. You're okay to be human. And I'll share with you, I had a lot of anxiety coming here today. This wasn't a simple thing for me. I know for you guys, you do this, right?
It's so not, though. I don't know.
Is
I
it
can't
hard
speak
for
for
you?
Momo, but sometimes more than others. With you, it's funny because we've been talking for years.
Right.
You're like a pen pal. I've never met you, and it's like that with a lot of people. I never met Rabbi Etiel Goldwich, and I've been speaking to him for 4 years. I never met him. But you're real. I see you. I thought you were a hologram. But so with a thing like this, I'm not so nervous. But there are episodes where I'm really nervous. But yeah, I want to hear about your anxieties coming into this.
Yeah, well, rejection is huge, right?
You thought we were gonna reject you,
Not so much you guys.
the listeners.
Momo, you seem really nice. No, Nachi, I know for a while. But and I'll be honest, in coming here today, I listened to a lot of episodes, but just going back and listening to Kivi Proman and listening to Jonathan Donath and listening even just to clips, see how you guys do it. There was a sense of anxiety, will I be enough? And when you put something out there and you guys have, you're doing such an amazing job here, right? And you have so many people listening to these episodes. And for myself, you always wonder, how will people take this in? And will they appreciate, our conversation today? Because everybody wants that sense of belonging, hey, attaboy, you did a good job. Everybody wants that. You can be 70 years old, you want that. So yeah, there's so much vulnerability in the room right now. And it's okay. It's okay to stumble over your words, and it's okay to maybe say the thing that's not exactly perfect. And
Story of my life.
yeah.
Yeah,
all
I
of us.
think Kivi Perlman, you mentioned that you're friends, that you go back with him. He emphasized this quite a bit, giving people permission to be.
Yeah.
I think that was his nusach.
Yeah.
Well,
And-
he lives that.
Yeah.
Right? He's 100 on that. That's
He's a vibe. He is.
He's a movement. He's a movement. When you really listen to his stuff and you see how deeply he believes this, and to be a client in his office, we can imagine just from listening to the episode, we can imagine what it's like to be in his presence, going through Gehenna, and he's just sitting there next to you going, it's okay. I'm with you.
His son was here sitting in the back.
His son is in our yeshiva.
Really?
His son's an awesome
so
person.
He was. Oh, that's so
Yeah,
cool.
but the way he was talking about his son, when his son was in the room, I thought that was incredible. He was saying, yeah, my son, a beautiful human, a beautiful, beautiful human. I love him. I love you. I was like, wow.
And he really means that.
Yeah, but it's so special that he does that.
I think we all love our children that way, but giving it language and being, again, that vulnerability of saying it in front of them.
Yeah.
That's very real. And by the way, you could see it. You could see the paros of that. And it's exceptional. I'm so jealous of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and some people, their love language is expressing it. I want to give permission to our listeners that maybe their thing isn't necessarily expression.
Gifts, buy your kid a car.
No, but even just being
Back in America.
present. even being present with our children as a way of demonstrating our love for them. It doesn't have to necessarily come
Like the actions.
correct.
Yeah. I
Let
hear
our
that.
actions speak louder than our words.
I think as kids we probably know that very well about our parents, right? Like we can feel their love in so many different ways. I knew, for example, I mentioned my dad was my Little League coach. For me, I knew that he wanted to be watching football on Sunday afternoons. I knew he was recording the game. He was taping the game. That's what we
Giants
used to
or
say it
Jets?
back in the day. Both. My dad's like a really big football guy. And
Oh, purist.
both. Yeah, no, he was. Again, there were certain
Who do you go
teams.
for though?
He was. I don't even know if he had like a Giants or a Jets preference. But I'll tell you, growing up,
Why are you
we were.
laughing?
Because it's the same question. Giants or Jets? And then, both. But who do you go for?
You can't.
Isn't that the original question?
No, because he's saying you can't be one. Like, for
can't
example,
go for both Giants and Jets.
I don't know if I'm
You
going to
were like-
offend you.
What?
In my family, if you're a Ranger fan,
Yeah.
we lose respect for you.
You're an Islander fan,
I can't tell you one player in the NHL today.
but you're Islanders.
In principle, when the Islanders win, it moves my heart. I grew up in Nassau Coliseum.
Moves my stomach.
Right? Okay, but say that I'm with you. My
Yeah.
father's a Mets fan.
I'm a Mets fan.
Like that's a real you cut him open, he bleeds, orange and blue. Yeah.
Do you ever try that?
No.
Okay, so we don't know
I try
for
not
sure.
to cut my father. No, but there's like I knew he wanted to be watching the football game on Sunday afternoon, but he was our Little League coach, and there were times that somebody would spoil the game and be like, "Oh my God, that was the greatest game! I can't believe the Jets pulled it off." And I would see that look in his eye, and I'm like, "Why did you just do that?" And there's no doubt that my father told us that he loved us, but absolutely, I felt it. He is a really incredible father. I'm very blessed.
As we wind down this episode, I want to give light to one of your works, Nitsotos, which is an organization. It's a movement. It's a sefer that you write. Talk about it. How's that going?
Thank God we finished Baruch Hashem publishing all 5. So on the Torah now we've written all 5, which is very special.
Nitsotos means sparks.
Yeah.
So like, what's
You
the?
want to know the real story of why I named it Sparks?
Yeah.
Like not the fake story that I tell people. You want to know the real story? Because it's only just us talking right now. Nobody's going to be listening to
Once
this.
we're here.
There was a Rebbe in yeshiva that made fun of me, and he meant well. He meant well. I was a Shana Aleph guy, new to Eretz Yisrael. I was trying to figure it out. Like, what does a yeshiva bacher do? Like, what do you do? Like, if you're not learning Gemara, what do you do? So, they have like those little Feldheim books, like those pocket-sized Sfarim.
Yeah.
So like the Strive for Truth. There was one called Sparks of Musar. And I used to like learn it like 3 minutes a day. I would like read like one page in it. And this Rebbe was making fun of me. And he's like, "You have like a Seder and Sparks of Musar." And yeah, I did, because I didn't know what I was doing, but that was like a part of my growth. So a little bit, the Sefer is named just as like a salute to that
jab.
Rebbe who made fun of me. Like,
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, from that Sparks of Musar came some Svarim. A little bit. Chas v'shalom, not in a negative way at all. Just it was like a funny thing. He used to call me. My nickname was Sparks.
That's awesome.
That's
So
like,
I would go like
it
Sparky.
wasn't just one-off comment. It was like
no,
a thing.
he was like, it was like that was our rapport, because we didn't really have so much to do with each other, as you can imagine.
He was trying to find. He's trying to find like a common ground, I guess.
Right. No,
And his common ground was
He
bullying.
was a good guy. He was a good. He was roasting me before roast culture. And he meant well, and he meant to say like, pick up a real Sefer.
Yeah.
But calling me Sparks. So there's a part
I
of
hope
me.
you sent him the safer and said like,
I didn't.
pick up this real safer.
I
Sparky.
didn't send it to him. I can't bring myself to do that. He's a great guy. I actually still know him today. He's a great guy. But there was a part of me that when we
That
started
was very
this
funny.
whole
You just
thing-
said he's a great guy. I still know him. I still know him. Like, what do you expect? To wipe your head?
no,
We
like
joke in North Woodmere, like when someone's about to say something like very negative about someone. Like, no, not in a bad way. No, just
entire-
terrible. Just not in a. I don't mean it in a negative way.
The
Right.
entire North Woodmere jokes about that. That's a lot. How many people are in North Woodmere?
right.
You're like 10,000 people there.
It's a big place, Valley Stream.
The entire North Woodmere jokes about that, or like
I don't think I used the word entire.
you said we joke about it in
We'll
North
have to
Woodmere.
go back to the clip.
Yeah, we meaning a few chevra when we are in North Woodmere.
So there's like 4 guys who joke about
Built
it.
the whole joke on the entire word that you inserted.
I object. Sustained.
Do you know? I'm sure you know what those words mean. The
Object and sustained.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what we were.
Sparks. Nitsotos.
Sparks. The other part of it, let's say the more legitimate part of it, was it started off actually as this Wednesday night shir. It really started in NCSY Kola, which was a Thursday night Mishmar shir, with guys asking to be introduced to deeper visions in Chumash. That was really what it was about. And so it was this one summer, and I said, okay, what if we just went like really deep? And I really prepared, and I went like, lots of chassidus and lots of connections, and I gave this shir, and it really went, and the guys really enjoyed it. And I said, well, what would happen, if I wrote it up? And so I wrote it up, and then went pretty viral, and then started doing it week after week, and we actually wrote all 5 volumes in a year, which was crazy. It was just every day preparing, waking up really early in the morning and writing it up. And then when it was done, it was sort of like this sefer that happened automatically. It became this Wednesday night shir in Mevaseret called Parsha on Steroids. And it had like this, there was these, group of guys who get together late Wednesday night. And it was electric in the sense that you saw these guys come alive because they saw the profundity, the depth, the complexity, the subtlety of every nuance in Chumash. And actually with the Haskamas on the Sefer, the most beautiful Haskama was actually from Rav Lapiansky. Because Rav Lapiansky said, this is not a knock on a meaningful minute, because every minute is awesome.
Okay.
But Rav Lapiansky said in today's day and age, we've gotten
not in a bad way. Right?
Yeah,
not in a bad way. Having said that,
shout out the entire North Women.
We've become accustomed to, like, say, bite-sized blurbs. That's what Rav Lapiansky said, as opposed to like really doing something in depth. And so I wrote it, and I put it specifically in English because I wanted people to, to have, let's say, a fluency when it came to these things, to really be exposed to it. And I never predicted how viral it would go. I mean, we're sold out, like,
amazing,
a bunch of times over.
Who published that?
We did it just by ourselves because we didn't want it. It was never meant to be a big thing. It was never meant to, let's say, put it out to Feldheimer Art Scroll and to see if it would like be in every sefer, in every farm store. It was more like, for the guys and the girls that had heard these shiurim, and then it became a thing. So, if anybody out there wanted to.
Where could someone get Nitsotos?
So I think it's going on Amazon soon. Right now there's a cool website called lulu.com, Lulu.com.
We can get pants there also, maybe. No,
maybe, I don't know. It's like they'll publish on a one-off, so you can order through there.
That's cool.
And then really we've sold it mostly just out of the yeshiva, and it's and then it becomes people want it, and sometimes I'll go speak somewhere, and that's the way it's gotten out there. There's very few copies left in the world right now, Baruch Hashem. But we're reprinting hopefully before this episode airs.
I like what you're emphasizing in contrast to Nachi's Meaningful Minute, because I had the opportunity to know. I recently was talking to Rabbi Kriegsman from Yeshiva Katana of Long Island, and he too was saying that it's a beautiful thing.
Pile it on,
minute. But
having said that,
Nishtav Shabbos Geret,
and yet,
exactly, not in a bad way, it is, we cannot think that it replaces sitting down and learning.
Right.
It's not meant, and let me limit this here.
That was a nervous cough. Yeah, go on.
It's not meant as a replacement, Meaningful Minute. It's not meant to replace Torah study. The learning that people do on a daily basis and the depth that they're looking for. I think the model, Nachi, feel free to weigh in on this. It's kind of your thing. But I think it's designed to engage people, inspire people, so that they're interested in doing something like sitting down and learning through Nitsotos.
You know what's incredible about Meaningful Minute? We've really piled on Nachi, but let's take a step back for a second.
Oh no, it's the redhead thing. Like,
that's a real thing for you, right?
My teachers would kick me out of class. I'd say it's because I have red hair, or it's because I'm Jewish. It's one of the two.
It's anti-Semitic, anti-gingy.
Yeah.
But seriously, for 1 second, because you've really done something very special. And
let's do a bite-sized blurb. Go.
But I mean this sincerely. It's really become quite a movement, Meaningful Minute, and the podcast and the articles and the app and all the things that you're doing was born out of that initial attempt to share Torah with people, right? And it doesn't matter how little it is, but if you can do even just a little bit is also good, right? And I think sometimes you get hate for this, and because it's like maybe they think what you're trying to say to the world is you always have to be inspired and you always have to be excited, and it's not okay to have this downtime where you're not feeling that way. And I don't think that's what you were saying at all. And I personally never got that message from you. The message that I got was do meaningful things with your life, even if it's incrementally, even if it's 1 minute. And that's something that, of course, it's not meant to replace. But for so many of us, it's just that 1 minute, right? And I remember the first time that you put me on Meaningful Minute. So, your phone blows up, right? And it's all of a sudden everyone's like, Rebbe, you got a Meaningful Minute. And I was like, after 120, I'll come to Hashem and he'll be like, Kavata itim la Torah. I'll be like, I had 3 meaningful minutes. Like, like
QR code.
Right, exactly. That's what you did. Now I get to go and say I was a meaningful person. Like, what can the Eibishter possibly want from me?
Right by the throne. Like, yeah, you're gonna be up there.
I don't think you have to defend what you did, because I think
No, I don't. It's all in jest. Like, I hear all the feedback, and I think that when you put yourself out there and do something to so many people, there's always going to be different interpretations. And when I started, I was super young. What?
How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the vulnerability, the anxiety of you've put yourself out there in a major way?
I drink. I'm kidding. Sruly.
Hey man, everyone has their way.
It's funny because I never ever drink. I cannot drink. I don't know. Maybe it used to be harder, but at this point, I just, just brush it off.
Have you developed a thick skin?
Probably not. My skin is not so thick. Although maybe I'll like try to make it look like that. But I think I developed a core circle of people who I trust, their advice, people on my staff, my family, my wife, and I take their opinions seriously. And, of course I hear everybody out, but I trust the people in my circle to be really giving me the feedback that I need. And
those are the people.
I'll tell you what I see Nachi do. What I see Nachi do.
You see me do a lot of things, but what are you going to talk about?
No, in response to this, I see you doing your thing. And when you inspire Klal Yisrael and you bring meaningful content to Klal Yisrael and you impact people's lives and you are able to do that good, I think that's what carries you through the feedback, and it's what carries you through people let's say, don't get it. And when you do good, you're okay.
Yeah, it's sort of, you just have to be okay with, like, listen, I have a Rebbe, I have, sort of hadracha, and if you're okay and you know that you're doing the best and you're doing the right thing, then everything else is just noise. Like, you ever see Kobe Bryant sitting on the bench with like a comedian, Chris Rock, sitting next to him, just like saying jokes in his ear, and Kobe's just like zoned in. He doesn't even hear him. Right. So if you're doing your thing, if you're doing the right thing, and you know the people around you are giving you that permission to be, then sometimes it's just noise. And you just need to like say, oh, thank you, right? And just keep going, because you can't carry, you can't carry every piece of luggage that someone puts on you, because sometimes it's just not yours.
Right. It's not your stone.
It's not your stone.
Don't scoop that up. Yeah.
And it's on them to maybe not put it on you. Like, maybe it goes both ways. Like, for someone who's a luggage putter, like, maybe don't, like, read the room a little bit. I don't know.
There's a lot of people, I think, putting their stuff on other people because they don't necessarily know how to hold it themselves. And still, I would say it takes someone who's really self-aware and someone who's really growth-oriented to not scoop that up. Yeah. And sometimes we do. That's not a simple task either.
It's trial and error. But I think that I struggled a lot with maybe a certain sect when I started doing this. This technology and social media. A certain island was just like, it's not satira you're sharing online. Like, I read this pamphlet in one of the shuls recently, which it was just like awful. And
not in a bad way.
In a terrible way, actually. Like, I'm not from North Woodmere. I'm gonna say straight up, like, it was just basically saying, like, there's no heter to be on social media. There's no heter to be sharing Torah online. It's not considered, and that's an extreme. But like, I struggled with that. But then at some point, I said, listen, again, like, I know what I'm doing. This is what I'm supposed to do, and you like it. You don't. Baruch Hashem, a lot of people do. And if you don't, then just hang up the phone. You don't have to listen. You don't have to partake. Nuance, right? Like,
hey man,
it goes for everybody. Not everything is yours to just like. We don't have to cancel people. We don't have to just like chime in and make machaz. Like, I think it's a thing of the past.
It's interesting. You mentioned before that you've never met E.T.L. Goldwicht, right? You've become at the center of this movement where so many people that are big mashpiyim in Klal Yisrael, and you're right there with them, giving them that voice. And it's not only that you've empowered their voice, but there's a Nachi Gordon personality that now exists in that that world of people who are making a difference. Mo, you're for sure now a part of that also,
So
right?
kind.
And like you've become a very public person. And I remember when you first started on the podcast, and I wondered,
Mainly because his glasses are so nice.
I
If you had
think
regular
it's
glasses-
interesting that people really fall in love with your glasses because they're awesome, but it's become like such a thing. Like you're a
By
great
the
guy
way,
beyond your glasses.
I promise you, we gotten multiple emails just last week of where did he get his glasses from?
Is that
Wow.
because Dr. Abramson tried them on?
It might have been
Might
because
have
of that.
been. Also, because he modeled a sweatshirt, and like people are like, the glasses come included. I said you
I
could buy.
object to the characterization of modeling the sweatshirt. I was wearing a sweatshirt and not. Oh, but I want to set the record straight. I was wearing a sweatshirt,
Yeah.
sitting there with my feet up on the desk. Like that's. I was just schmoozing with Nachi.
Right.
He takes out his camera, takes a picture. Next thing I know,
Yep.
I'm getting like people are sending me like screenshots. I'm like, oh dear.
Yes,
Yeah, for
I was
sure.
literally just sitting there, and Nachi like took a picture.
he modeled.
Yes.
Erroneous.
Erroneous.
I should put out the catwalk also. You do one of those.
Erroneous.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
I would love to see you.
Once I
walking
see
down
the video of you
catwalk.
walking down Jonathan the aisle.
Hey, man. Certain things I'm going to regret saying on this podcast for sure. That's definitely
the way
one
it
of
is. But L'chaim,
Chaim.
L'chaim.
Thank you
You
so
don't
much.
drink. You don't drink
I-
L'chaim.
This
Yeah, I
is
don't.
Poland's. This is Poland's.
We're all
finest
holding up
spring.
empty cups, but
What it means to be from Maine.
yeah.
Chaim.
Hope you enjoyed that episode of Meaningful People. Mama, wasn't it incredible? His grandmother at 70 years old. became
Gewalt.
friends. 70 years old.
Halavai, we should all have such fortitude to rethink things that we get used to. Gewalt. At 70
Right?
years old. It's actually unbelievable. I'm here right now as we speak in Tom's River, and we're celebrating my dad's 70th birthday with my whole family.
Oh,
And
how are you?
It's like it's his 70th birthday, and to think that at 70 years old, like we're here with children and grandchildren and such a full life's experiences, and we're just celebrating that. And to think that at that inflection point in one's life, you can just rethink everything and take on from Yiddishkeit. It's wild.
It's never too late, man. It's never too late. Rabbi Burg showed us that him and his family are just an inspiring story of constant growth. That's what this episode is about. Never stop growing. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate you leaving a review, 5-star rating, and we hope to see you next week here on Meaningful People Podcast. We got a lot of new episodes coming your way. We're very excited about it. And all I could say is have a great day. Did that rhyme a little bit, maybe? All I could say is have a great day.
All I can say is have a great day. If you throw the is in
Oh,
there, it
well, look
throws
at
off
you.
the run. Yeah.
All I could say, have a great day.
Well, you can throw the is as
Okay,
part of the
that's
second
fine.
phrase. All I can say is have a great day. You don't have to lose the is completely. You just have to,
You should do. You should do like
you got this, though.
poetry
You got
slams.
this. Right?
All right, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, fellas, men, women, gentlemen, children. We'll see you next week. Adios,
Thank
amigos.
you.